Hey everybody, this is Jason Ostrowski, and welcome to another edition of the Everything Real Estate Podcast. I'm excited to have you this week. I'm excited that you're listening because we're going to try and do something a little bit different for this episode. My guest this week is Christine Cavalieri. Christine is a fantastic leadership coach. She is part of the IFC, the International Coaching Federation. She also brings 19 years of experience partnering with executives and teams. She also just happens to be a facilitator for the Dare to Lead program, which is a skill-based playbook for leaders and based on the New York Times #1 bestseller, Dare to Lead by Brené Brown. And sometimes we could use the perspective of someone like Christine to help kind of recalibrate where we are right now. What are our intentions moving forward? Where do we want to go in life? You know, whether it be business, personal, family, you name it. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to do a live coaching session today between Christine and myself. And I think a lot of you will relate to what I'm saying on this podcast. I think as realtors, we all relate to each other and what we're going through on a day-to-day basis. So we're going to get into it with Chris based on the book Dare to Lead by Brené Brown, and we'll pick it up on the other side. Chris, how you doing today? I'm excited to actually do this with you. This is going to be a little bit of a different experience today. How are you?
I'm excited to companion you on this difficult. Did I say difficult? Oh, Freudian. Different experience. Thanks for trusting me.
Yeah, no problem. So for our listeners out there, what we're going to do today is a little bit different now. Usually I am the one asking the questions. Usually I am interviewing people. And today we're going to do a legitimate coaching session between me and Chris. Chris is actually going to ask me a series of questions. I am going to answer as honestly and truly as I possibly can. And hopefully this will provide value to you. And, hopefully you will relate to what I'm saying. I'm sure a lot of you will. So, without further ado, Chris, I'm going to let you take it away. So go ahead.
Okay. I feel like I should just do a little caveat about what is coaching? And oftentimes people want to know, what's the difference between coaching or mentorship or therapy? So mentorship is a relationship where your mentor is the expert. They kind of tell you advice. They tell you, this is the wisdom and you can choose to follow it or not. And they can make connections. Coaching is, we talk about where do you want to go? What resources do we have to get there? What are some of the potholes that might get in the way as we journey towards this destination? And therapy is, we're going to go back and fill in those potholes. So does that help a little?
That makes perfect sense. Yes, absolutely.
So coaching is very forward focused. Okay. And a lot of times we're going to riff because we haven't talked about this ahead of time. Full disclosure, we don't really know what's going on. And a lot of times people want to coach towards a goal. And we could certainly do that. We could say, okay, what's a goal? We can coach towards that. Or we can coach towards something else, which is more about intention. So like in January, a lot of people will reach out and say, oh, I want to coach for my goals for 2021, year goals, my quarter goals, all these goals. And the invitation that coaches often bring is when you coach towards a goal is something fixed, right? And we have to expend energy to get to that goal. And I'm a visual person, so I picture a goal like a ladder. So every day I'm either climbing up that ladder or I'm looking down and realizing, oh, I haven't come that far. So I'm expending energy to either go up or down, but I'm also assessing, where am I in the ladder? Am I up? Am I down? I'm kind of judging. Mm-hmm. I'm also looking around where are other people on their ladders? So it's a little disruptive. It's, yes, we can coach towards that. The invitation that coaches will often bring is, what's your intention for this year or for this quarter? And the difference being, if you're going to go to a visual, is an intention is more like an overarching way of showing up in the world. If coaching towards a goal is a ladder, coaching towards intention is like a parachute, big and encompassing. We don't know exactly where we're going to go. We don't know the metrics. But we can control the vents, so we can control a little bit of the direction, but we're going to be fluid and responsive to what comes up. And because it's more fluid and responsive, it's creative. You can live in a more creative space, and that creates energy and intention. So you can say, this is the intention with how I want to show up in the world. And you can also say, how do I want to be in this intention of how do I work towards my goal? So you can say, I want to be curious. That's my intention, but I want to hit this goal. So you can do two at the same time.
Yeah, I think that actually speaks to me, because I know for me, I'm very goal oriented. I'm very goal driven, which can be a very good and a very bad thing at the same time, because, for me personally, I am constantly looking at my goals for this year. Right. And sometimes right now it's good. Okay. I'm actually exceeding my goals right now, which is great. That's a point of personal pride for me. But at the same time, sometimes you don't hit those goals. And I know for me, it makes my skin crawl, right? I just want to get out there and not stop until I reach those goals. And that's not always a healthy thing, So I like the intention part of it.
And coaches really hone in on word choice. Okay, so if we talk about like goal and intention, what I heard you use was good and bad and great. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's good. So then bad is bad. Like that's binary thinking. So can it just be, and instead of looking for perfection, which is kind of goal oriented, can we look at progress?
Yes.
And the reason being that when we use binary thinking like that, we're actually self-judging too. Like, oh, I'm good, I'm bad. And when we get in that judgment space, we actually activate a little bit of a fear response. So we can get that like FOMO and all that stuff, right? You're shaking your head.
Yeah. No, I completely get that. I think, my wife will tell you I'm extremely competitive. But more, it's a competitive thing with myself, right? Sure. A lot of people judge themselves against other people in their field, but for me, it's like playing a round of golf, right? You're really playing yourself. You're trying to do as well as you can for you. And so for me, it's like a competition against myself, and I get really into it. So, you're right. I do. There is a lot of very black and white when it comes to, to me and my goals. So.
Yeah. And then, so the invitation is, what would it take to embrace? Not, sometimes we think, well, if we get to the middle of black and white, it's gray. It's not gray. It's zebra striped.
Okay.
Right. So I am still working and achieving hard, but, and basically, let me give you the cheat, is to get to the middle is to say, can I just embrace that I'm progressing? And I'm better than I was yesterday. Am I making progress? Because if you're going to compete only with yourself, then just judge yourself. Did I move more? Did I move something today that wasn't there yesterday? Mm-hmm. So let's play with some coaching questions, if that's okay.
Okay.
And I offer these because these are great questions as a former realtor that you could also use just with clients, right? And it just, first of all, it establishes rapport, but sometimes it unearths stealth goals or expectations that they may have that they haven't even realized that they have. Okay. So the first question is, December 31st of this year, in order for you to say, what a fabulous year, personally or professionally, you answer whatever comes up to you. What would you have to have experienced or learned or received or done?
I think I think it's for me to feel that satisfaction is hitting not only the goals that I set, but also following through on the things that I said I was going to do this year, right? It's not just about reaching those goals. It's about doing. If I set out to accomplish something, I want to look back and say that I've accomplished it. So for me, one of the things that I've talked about on the podcast before is that I'm a big believer in the book, the 12-week year. And so I set my goals for 12 weeks and then kind of have long-term goals at the same time. And so, I've knocked off 2 of my long-term goals, which was buy a house this year personally and have an investment property personally this year. So that was 2 of my goals. But I think there are subsets of my goals, right? So I not only professionally, but health-wise. And obviously this podcast, this was one of my goals was to do well with the podcast. So, time will tell on that, I guess. But I think at the end of the year, if I can look back and say, I've hit the marks that I followed through on what I wanted to do, that would be successful for me.
And personally or professionally, between where you are right now and December 31st, what might you be concerned about or afraid of?
Well, I think, you being a former realtor and probably masochist, being in our profession, I would say the momentum that you have professionally is only sustained by what you're doing now, right? So I have to do things now to sustain my business going forward later in the year. And so, you worry, how is your business going to be in 3 months? How's it going to be looking? Is it going to drop off the face of the earth? These are the things that we all worry about, where our business is going to come from. So I think that's a constant thing with, I think, all of us, not just me, but that's one of my fears. Another thing is, and I'll be very candid and open with everybody out there. You and I talked a little bit about this before we got started is, doing this podcast, I don't have a degree in journalism. I don't have a degree in communications. I'm just a guy who tends to talk a lot and likes talking to people, so for me, I don't know how it's going to be received by other people. It's kind of a big leap of faith for the company to give this to me, quite honestly, and for me to be doing it. So I truly enjoy it, but I don't know how other people feel about it. So I guess my, part of your fear is how it would be received. So, if I'm being candid.
And thank you. You're actually beyond candid. I hear you being vulnerable. Right? And I need to just do a little shout out on vulnerability because I trained with Brené Brown, and some folks will be familiar with her work. And so the definition of vulnerability is uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. So, that's what a vulnerable conversation is. Okay, so I heard that you were, you're concerned about the challenges that you have and the podcast experience. I also heard underneath there, I'm just going to riff a little sideways, what often is referred to as imposter syndrome, right? You saying, oh my gosh, I never did. I'm like, you're doing it. You're doing it, right? But the invitation is that may be, and by the way, that's not a real syndrome. It's just an experience that we have, and it's totally normal. Think about how many of us as realtors, most of us came from other professions, right? So we feel like imposters in this new role. But shout out to Adam Grant's new book, Think Again. He talks about how imposter syndrome actually just means that our competence is higher than our confidence, right? Mm-hmm. And the other end of the spectrum is armchair expert, where your confidence is super high, your competence super low. So of the two, I would rather welcome the imposter syndrome, the imposter in my head, that self-talk, than the armchair expert. Because the beautiful thing about the imposter, as Adam says in his book, is I can always learn more. Right. So my imposter is a good thing to welcome. Great. You're telling me I need to increase my confidence. It doesn't mean I need to know everything. Sometimes I just need to know what's the resource or who should I refer this to. But the reason I called over to it is, you probably heard the phrase, that which we resist persists. So if we're like, oh my gosh, I got to push away those feelings of imposterism, if we can say, oh yeah, I see you. Thank you. You're reminding me that I should be checking out another course or blah, blah, blah. It's just a helpful thing. So we don't resist it as much.
Yeah, I think with doing this initially, I can still remember the first one that I recorded where I'm like, oh my God, I'm actually doing this. I'm actually talking to somebody on the other end and we're recording this, and I don't know how this is going to turn out. Now I feel obviously much more comfortable doing this as time progresses, right? But yeah, you do feel, I feel like I'm humble enough to know that I am not an expert at this, but I also am confident enough to say, look, everybody started from the same place, right? The same as real estate. For everybody that's starting in real estate out there, I remember when I first started, I was deathly afraid of having a client that actually wanted to write an offer, because you're like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I don't know what I'm doing. There's nobody to help me. I hope I show this house, and they don't want to write an offer, right? And an experienced agent came up to me one day and he said in my old office, and he said to me, and I'll never forget it. He said, so what are you doing right now with your business? What are you doing? Because he felt like he could sense that I was procrastinating. And I was telling him all the marketing that I was working on and this and that. And he said, no. He said, just get out there and do it. He said, you're going to learn by doing. Just get out there and just do it. Enough of the excuses, just go do it. And it stuck with me. And I was like, you know what? You're right. From that point forward, no matter what it was in life that I was doing, everybody had to start at the same place at some point in time. So, a very long-winded answer when it comes to the podcast, like that's how I felt about it, is that I'm starting from a place that everybody else who is doing this started. And that's from scratch, so.
Yeah. And what I hear you describing and what the agent suggested, and oh my God, I hear you too. I got a FSBO within my first 2 weeks of getting my license. And I thought, oh crap, now what do I do?
It's like the scariest feeling.
Yeah. But the invitation that I heard extended by the agent was like, just go and do the thing. Like the only way to get to confidence is practice. So we can stay in our head all day long, like, oh, I need another course. That's where, that confidence, we over-index on the confidence. We got to balance it with the challenge, which is actually doing the thing.
Yep.
And then that will build our grounded confidence. So let's continue on these questions. Okay. So you asked, we kind of described what success would look like. We talked about what is the concerns or fears that you might have. So the third question I ask is, what are you excited for the rest of this year, personally or professionally? Like, what are you excited about?
I think for me, it's in my career personally, the thing that I'm excited about is expanding my business and possibly bringing more people into the fold, whether that's starting a team or, people have been on me that know me in the business, in my office, and friends that have said forever and a day, you need an assistant. Like, you need to go out and get an assistant. And I've been fighting it because, quite frankly, Chris, I am a micromanager. I'm probably the worst possible micromanager you can find out there. I know this, and I know, mentally, it's just taking me time to wrap my head around delegating. And so that's a big thing for me. So one of the things that I'm excited about is potentially delegating more. Also, for me is, just financially, I think, having more safety, I guess you could say, and security when it comes to, doing more business and that the things that we can do with that, because ultimately, in my long-term vision, and maybe we'll get into this, maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but we were with some friends a few weeks ago and we were sitting around a fire outside. It was real cold. It was, a nice fire pit night. We're sitting with some friends and we're all talking, and we travel a lot together. And we all have kind of the same mindset. And one of my friends said to me, whatever it takes, it's, all this is just a path to the sand. And for me, that was the perfect encapsulation of my life. Everything I want to do is to get to a beach somewhere, that to me, that's my long-term vision, path to the sand. That's etched in my brain. So I think for the rest of the year and for years moving forward, ultimately, what I am doing is to put myself on a beach and just like kind of veg out. Like that's what I want to do, you know? And so long term, that's my vision. So there's a lot in that, I know.
No, but that's fantastic. That's like, that's like a mantra, path to the sand.
Yep. That's it.
Okay, so I'm going to continue on this series of questions. So then when you think about where you are now and where you want to be in December 31st or en route to your path to the sand, what must change, personally or professionally?
That's
where you are right now, like what must change?
That's actually a really good question. I think it is that delegation side, right? Because in order to do that, I feel like you have to rely and lean on other people to grow. It can't just be myself doing it all the time because there's just not enough hours in the day. And so I think I've come to that realization finally where I stopped being a knucklehead and stop trying to do every single bit of everything myself and try and incorporate more people. I also think that, and this is delving into the very personal here, so I am going to just put this out there for a lot of people who know me personally. I've had some challenges health-wise and suffer, from a chronic illness for the past 25 years. And so for me to ultimately get to where I want to go, I have to take care of myself physically and have to work on that side of my life. That's a constant challenge for me as well, is to live as healthy of a lifestyle as possible to enable me to potentially get to where I want to go. And so, yeah, a lot of my goals are also health-wise too.
Yeah, let me just pull a side note over here. A lot of times in coaching sessions, people want to talk about just the professional piece. And I'm a leadership and team coach. And the leadership term that I use is that a leader is anyone who sees the potential in people and process and has the courage to develop that potential. And sometimes that's us. Like we have to take leadership of our own lives. Right? We're all, especially as realtors, or certainly as me, as a sole business owner, who we are is how we lead, and we're the CEOs of our own organizations. And a lot of times we tend to be proactive and strategic about how we serve externally, as opposed to, whoa, hold on. I am the CEO of this Chris Cavalieri body. I heard you getting real clear on your organization and what being a CEO of your body means. Mm-hmm. So that takes me to the last question, which is, and what must never change?
Whew. I think for me, I have to define what it is I want. Because for me, I think there is a part of me when I deem something to be important to me, I am solely focused. A lot of times I'm like focused like a laser beam on what that is and trying to attain that. But outside of that, I could care less, right? Like if it's not, I mean, again, we're just personally speaking. And, a friend of mine always talks about, she said, when you're focused on something, you are like, I don't want to say obsessive, but like I get to a point where I want to work towards that goal like all the time. And then if I'm not into that goal, then I'm probably as laid back as you could possibly be. Right. So outside of those things. So for me, I feel like defining what I want and being okay with maybe not reaching that goal, maybe I get 75% of the way there. So it's like defining what I want and being okay with not achieving certain things, right? I have to be okay with that and being able to be hands off about it, and not obsess about something. I think does that make sense? I don't know if that makes sense,
Well, so what, if I could kind of tie two threads that I actually heard what must never change in your what must change answer. You said, what must never change is I got to take care of my health.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
You're right. That can never change. Yeah. Correct.
And I just wanted to surface it because, we hold it like it's something that we know, but we want to hold that as true for you, for your organization. You have a health focus, you have a business focus, like you're balancing this, and you have a path to the sand focus.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So what is one thing that you could do in the next week that would clarify or define a path to the sand? Like, we can talk generically about, path to sand, but Jason, what holidays have you booked for this year? What time have you protected?
Yeah. So I think that's actually a really good point, because there was a time where I would never go on vacation. I would go on vacation, but I'd be working the whole time, and so I think I am getting better, not perfect. I am getting better at setting aside time to be on that beach, right? Or to take a trip. We try and do a trip now every quarter. If it's going to be, usually it's a long weekend, and then maybe there'll be a couple of long trips in between. Obviously with COVID, that kind of got rearranged a little bit, but, instead of going away somewhere far, we would just, go to the shore and spend a week down there. And so, I think for me, it's about that. So if you're asking me short term, what I need to change to get there, or I think, I don't know. I don't know if I need to change a whole lot. I think I need to stay on the path. I think that stay the course. I like where I am right now. I do have to say, I do feel it's taken me years to, you talk about those different paths that I have, professionally, health wise, and ultimately long-term vision. It took me years to kind of see the forest for the trees, have these different buckets is what I guess I would say, right? You have this bucket that you're putting into. So I think for me, it's organization, because I feel like stay organized, be more organized. I think that's the answer, is to be more organized and stay organized. Because for me, I have a tendency to be 100 places at once. And so for me, time management is always a big thing with me. And just organization in general is something that I struggle with. So I'm getting more organized in my life. And I think that's the continued change that I need. So.
And I heard you saying that a resource that you were going to be embracing was support, building more of either team or admin or.
Yeah.
Okay. So a model that I'll often use, as I said, I like visuals for people who are kind of in this place, is to think about a scuba diver and a snorkeler. So when we're out there doing our thing, like you're out there, you're crushing it, you're being the scuba diver. Like you're down low, you can see up close, your clients, you see your business, you've got your hands on it, everything, you hyper focus, right? At the same time, when you're a scuba diver, like you're encumbered. You're not very nimble. You have a lot of equipment on, and you have limited resources. Like there's only so much air in the tank. So when you think about what would it take to go from being a fully direct contributor to being an indirect contributor, it's like being a snorkeler. So you're higher. You can see more perspective. You can see around the other piece of coral, right? You can dive down and look at that shell, but you can't stay there, because as a snorkeler, your perspective is wider. You have more access to resources because your snorkel has all the air above. But just recognize that sometimes when you're a scuba diver, you don't know where the boat is, and you may not know where land is. Mm-hmm.
It's very true. It's very true.
So if you were to transition to being like a snorkeler of in this metaphor, what would have to change?
I think it's about that delegation. I think it's stop being so in the weeds with everything. That's what it comes down to. It's like, it's okay. I think allowing myself to be okay with the fact that, things are not going to fall apart if I'm not there 24 hours a day, to realize that. And I think I have realized that. And then ultimately, I think some of what I do, I need to relax more. And so for me, this goes back to the health thing and taking care of myself, is that, just an aside, like for me now, I'm meditating every day. Right. And I'm doing things to kind of keep that center, and keep that calmness in you in a business that can be just very hectic and you're problem solving every day. I feel like for me, I needed a system. I feel like a lot of realtors out there feel like sometimes life is chaos, especially in this market. It can be very chaotic. And I think for a lot of us out there, we need a system to kind of help us along the way. And whether that is a system for, my health, or a system for my business, or something that is systematic to help, we have a CRM, right? Mm-hmm. We have a customer resource management system that helps us organize the chaos with our clients. I feel like I need kind of like a CRM for life, right? I need like we talk about the buckets. I need the health bucket. And what am I doing there? I need, the personal bucket. What am I doing there? I need the podcast bucket. What am I doing there? And I need the business bucket. What am I doing there? And then define that with, actionable steps, because it's easy to talk about all that stuff. But if I don't have the actionable steps, then again, a very long-winded answer to being a snorkel. By the way, I'm deathly afraid of deep water, so I don't think I would ever be a scuba diver. It's like my biggest fear. I don't know what's coming behind me. Like I would never be out in open water ever. So snorkeling is fine by me. So yeah.
Okay, but let me tie something together here. So right now in the market that we're in, that is like deep water. Okay, because there is so much scarcity. So scarcity drives fear, just the way dark, deep water and what we can't see around the rock drives fear, right? So then what scarcity will manifest is, oh my gosh, I know I have the CRM. I know I have the plan. I know I have the strategy, but I'm just going to keep doing it. Even though I said that health is my focus, and even though I blocked this time to go to the beach, I'm going to take all the calls. I'm going to do all this thing because there's scarcity. Because the market right now is fueling scarcity.
Yes, absolutely. For sure.
So I love that you said you're meditating. Calm is a leadership superpower. And as realtors, we're leading people through difficult transitions and transactions. We got to be calm. Anxiety is contagious and not always helpful.
Well, they talk about that, in terms of doing a real estate transaction. You're that duck that is sitting on the pond, right? And the panic is your feet below the surface, but on top of the surface, you need to remain calm, right? And so I actually always think of that metaphor, like, just being that duck on the pond with my feet paddling, frantically below the surface, but on top, I am calm. So I totally agree with you. It is the market right now is all about scarcity, and it's finding, rising up to that challenge, right, to remain calm.
And just getting clear on boundaries, right? Because if we don't protect our boundaries, our personal boundaries, our health is impaired, and we're showing up with anxiety and scarcity, and it leaks out of us as we're trying to do transactions and show up for buyers and sellers. That's not confidence inspiring.
Yeah. And I think, and I mentioned, earlier about time blocking for me. And I think one of those things is setting the boundaries. And I think as agents, we all struggle with setting those time boundaries, right? Because you may have to rush out to show a house in 20 minutes in this market, or else it's gone, right? But you may have your kid's soccer game at that time. You may have, something else going on in life where suddenly you're dropping stuff. You're not protecting your time. And for me, like I'll have clients texting me at, 6:30 in the morning. Well, I got into real estate. Part of the reason was that I didn't have to get up early. I am not an early riser. But also there's a health component to that. With my condition, if I don't get enough rest, that's going to affect me. Right. Mm-hmm. So I don't respond to those things early in the morning. My cutoff, it's 9 to 9, and that's enough. I feel like, and protecting that now has become a priority in my life, whereas before it didn't matter. I would always respond because I thought that was the right thing to do, quickly get back as quick as you can, now it's changed a little bit. So.
Well, this has been a lot of fun. I mean, obviously, if this was a real coaching session, we'd be going a little bit deeper into it, but out of sensitivity for our audience.
Yeah, it is funny, like talking to you, like I'm pretty much an open book about stuff with people. And maybe sometimes it's way too much information, but this was fun. I enjoy talking about this stuff. It's almost like a sounding board, that you learn something about yourself through all this. Even in my answers, I'm like, it makes me think about certain things,
Yeah. So what's one thing you want to take forward from this conversation for you, not for the podcast, but for Jason?
I think ultimately, I think it is getting this from you, Chris, is that I like that scuba diver kind of analogy. I do. Every time that I want to jump in full force, maybe I shouldn't. I think that's the takeaway, is that, take the big picture view, and don't get stuck in the day-to-day minutia all the time. Because sometimes I feel like you get up and it's like a hamster on a wheel, or it's like a roller coaster, whatever analogy you want to use. But you just get on and you ride the wheel or ride that roller coaster every day. You get off and then you do the same thing the next day. And before you know it, it's 3 months later in this market, and you haven't taken the big long-term picture. Mm-hmm. And so I think for me, it just reaffirms that having, be able to step back.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
And then the invitation would be, what would it be like if you were the captain of the boat? Yeah. And you had multiple divers and multiple snorkelers. What does that look like?
Yeah.
So,
well, that's the ultimate goal. I told you, with deep water, I'm sending out other people. I'm not going out.
Some people love the deep. Know your zone of genius.
Exactly. I'll stay on the ship nice and dry. So
all right, cool.
Anyway, well, thank you so much, Chris. This was actually a lot of fun. I learned a lot from you. I learned a lot, from my answers. I feel like now I got to go back and listen and kind of evaluate myself, do some psychoanalysis, So, I really appreciate your time, and I'm sure we will be talking to you again in the future. So thank you very much.
All right. Take good care. Bye-bye.
That was the interview with Chris this week. It was definitely a unique experience being asked the questions and not asking the questions. It was kind of a cathartic experience for me. My takeaway from spending some time with Chris is that sometimes it's good to take a step back and take a macro view of where you are and where you want to go. And sometimes we all need help in getting there. And for us as realtors, being in the business that we're in, sometimes it's beneficial to talk to somebody like a coach to help define what is important to you and what do you need in your life and maybe what you don't need in your life. So I know for me, just in that short time frame of that interview, it helped me to kind of sort things out in my head a little bit and will help me moving forward. And for those of you who enjoyed the interview with Chris today, we're going to have her back in the future for another episode on a different topic coming up soon. So stay tuned for that. Well, that's it for this week. Join us in another couple of weeks. We'll have a new guest on for you. Don't forget to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to hear a certain topic that we haven't covered yet, please reach out to me, jason.ostrowski@foxroach.com. We always value your input. But for now, stay safe out there, stay selling, and we'll catch you next time on the Everything Real Estate Podcast.